Good morning, students. So it is our third lecture on Hayavadana, and in this particular lecture, we will concentrate on the important characters of this particular play. As in my previous lectures, I have concentrated on the theme of Hayavadana, that is the matter of existentialism, and how so far this particular play was considered as an existential play. And at the same time, I have completed the importance of the plot construction in Hayavadana. And in this particular lecture, I will discuss on Carnard's treatment of the characters and the art of characterization in Hayavadana in detail. So before going to any particular character, let us begin with the particular reference to the major characters in Hayavadana, and at the same time we have to concentrate on the characters and so far as the characters are concerned, how they are incorporating in the main plot and the subplot. So at the very beginning, at the very onset, we have to think about the fundamental focus of Hayavadana. And as I have discussed earlier, we can find that there are two major plots that have been taken in consideration. They are taking the basic, a kind of relations are there. In the main plot, we find there are three major characters, and the first one is Devadatta, the second one is Kapila, and the third one is Padmini, as I have shown here in this particular reference. So you can find, as I mentioned earlier, that this is Devadatta and Kapila and Padmini. So generally, as we have found in our plot construction lecture, that means it was discussed in our previous one, there is a particular, a story is being built on the basis of these three characters, that is Devadatta and Kapila and Padmini. And how this was happening, it was discussed in detail in our plot construction section. As you can find that in this particular play, you will find that Devadatta and Kapila, they have been found to be present as important characters, and also Padmini, and they are often considered as Rama, Lakshmana, and Sita at the very onset of this particular play. But as the play progresses, we find that the temperament certainly got changed, and from Rama and Lakshmana, a kind of rivalry is being taken place on the basis of the character Padmini. In the second section, we can find, in the second perspective, we can find that there is a particular kind of a subplot, and that as the particular title of this play is concerned, we can find that the subplot is being associated in terms of, the character of Hayavadana. That ultimately the name of the play is Hayavadana. So therefore, in the subplot, we will find a group of characters being incorporated. There is a particular performance is going to taken place, and there you can get in the theater company. We find that Bhagavata is the director, and there are also the other characters like the first character, second character. Okay, these are the players. Okay, who are participating in this particular play. That is the play within a play that will going to take place. But and also there is a particular character whose name is Hayavadana, as we find, and as I mentioned in the previous lecture, that the Hayavadana, this particular name has been taken from a character whose head is of a horse, and the character is a human being in general. And along with Hayavadana, we can find there is a particular child, the child who has to be taken in consideration, as the child is referring to the child of these three, okay, because we cannot identify whose child it was, because the body and head debate, that takes place in this particular play. And there are other characters who are, that the chorus and the dolls and goddess Kali, and the minor actors whom we have mentioned, we have named in this particular reference. So in this particular lecture, I will discuss on Devadatta. Yes, that is the fundamental focus of this particular lecture. We will discuss on the character of Devadatta in detail. Okay, so let us think about Devadatta. So it is the character of Devadatta. Now the question certainly arises, who is this Devadatta? And as we can trace, as we can find, that Devadatta, the name, in this particular name, you will find Deva, And why Deva? Because Karnad is trying to refer to this particular man as if some characteristics of the devatas, you see, that have been incorporated here. And at the same time, we have to keep it in mind that this Devadatta is the son of the revered Brahmin Vidyasagara, you see. So ultimately, what I'm trying to suggest here, what I'm trying to refer here, that though we are reading this particular play, that is Hayavadana, though we are thinking in terms of any particular character, but don't consider Karnad's plays are simply focusing on any particular character alone. Rather, we have to think that the characters are to some extent are representatives of a particular class. You see, that ultimately, not only in Havana, but also in other plays by Karnad, that is Girish Karnad, you will find that somehow the characters are solely important. The characters are very important. Why? Because the characters are no longer to be considered as characters alone. Rather, they have to be treated with much more importance, as these characters are referring to any particular class. So you see that so far as the societal systems of India is concerned, I'm not stating about the time of Karnad, because Karnad belongs to our present scenario. But whenever Karnad is writing his plays, specifically the plays like Nagamandala, the plays like Jayati, Hayavadana, and maybe Fire and the Rain, everywhere you will find that Karnad is trying to propagate any particular society, the society that is being related with the typical, the glorious past of Indian perspectives. You see, in your last year, in your last semester, you have gone through a particular text by Shudraka, and it was Mritchakatika, and we have found that Mritchakatika actually dealt with a particular society of Ujjaini, where we can find the characters like Bashanta Sena and the characters like you see the other characters, the Palaka and the other characters are there. But what I'm trying to suggest here, that the typical form of society that was portrayed in the typical ancient literature, Sanskrit literature to be specific, you will find that whenever we read Karnad, Karnad's texts are more contemporary than mythical. He is using myths, he is using the time that have been related with the ancient glorious past of India, but at the same time, he is trying to use them in a typical contemporary situation, as I have discussed in our discussion on our previous discussion, previous lecture on the existential crisis and existentialism that is in Hayavadana. What I'm trying to suggest here, you see that so far as the typical Indian Hindu society is concerned, we found that the persons were, or the classes have been divided into four major sections, and that is, number one, it is Brahmin, number two, it is Kshatriya, number three, it is Vaishya, and number three, it is Shudra. So ultimately, it is a kind of a pyramidal structure that have to be taken in consideration in a particular society. So you can identify that there are some static or stereotypical representations made on the basis of these particular characters. Say, for example, if we find a Brahmin, then we will consider that the Brahmins were considered at the time as they are the middle persons, you see, that can relate human beings with gods. So Deva, again, the name. And at the same time, the Brahmins are associated with learning. The Brahmins are associated with education. The Brahmins were associated with a particular form of, you say, wisdom and knowledge, obviously. Okay, so what we can state, what you can identify here, that whenever it is a matter of Brahmin, okay, you will find that somehow in each and every kind of Brahmin, there is a particular reference of head, you see. The head is much more important than the body. Now, think about Devadatta here. Devadatta is being considered as the son of the revered Brahmin, as I've mentioned just now. He is the son of revered Brahmin Vidyasagara. Now, identify the name here, Vidyasagara. Why Vidyasagara? This particular term has been used. Why Karnad is choosing this name? Just because Vidya and Shagara, you see, That means it is the ocean of study, oceans of knowledge, oceans of education. So here you will find that this particular name is not a simple innovative name. Rather, it is actually referring to the character of Devadatta. As Devadatta is a Brahmin by caste, so the typical creeds and patterns of typical forms of Brahminism, the superiority, the kind of presentation that have been found in Didan society, all these traits, all these considerations can have to be related with Devadatta. Okay. Again, he is the son of Vidyasagara, so ultimately you can consider that Vidyasagara is a concept rather, where you can find that Devadatta is a child of education. Devadatta is a child of wisdom to some extent, if possible, quote unquote wisdom. Devadatta is a child of knowledge. So whenever you will think of the character Devadatta, you will find somehow that Devadatta is being associated. Devadatta is always located where head is much more important than the body. Think about the ancient Brahmins, okay? The typical Bengali Brahmins, to be specific, you will find in the ancient form, everywhere where the Brahmins have been projected, they are soft, their bodies, think about them, they're fatty, obese almost. Okay, so it is not simply a particular kind of a representation. Rather, you have to concentrate on the particular form that Devadatta's characteristics, Devadatta's figure, body, physique, mind, all these things have been pointed by Karnad with this particular reference. Now, in the next point, we will see that here it has been mentioned that he is calm, obviously. He is fair, that is the complexion. He is handsome. I'm not stating handsome, this particular term, in reference to the present considerations of handsome. Here, I am trying to suggest that Devadatta is not actually handsome in its true sense, because the body was not in its proper form. Rather, Devadatta is, what should I say, Devadatta is attractive to some extent, not from body, but from brain, that's from attitude, you see. So calm, fair, and handsome. He was popular. So it might be possible that Devadatta is good looking, yes. He is a popular man. Why? Because of the status that he enjoys at this moment, and loved and admired by all. So that is the consideration. You see that in a particular society where Brahminism is ruling, you will find that a particular person like Devadatta was revered and admired by all. In Dharmapura, he was a learned young man. Okay, again the term learned. Just try to identify the names, the terms that have been used here. He was a learned young man. He was a Pandit, a great scholar of Sanskrit, you see. He could recite the poetry of Kalidasa and other Sanskrit poets by heart. He was intelligent and knowledgeable. So these are the terms that have been ascribed to the character of Devadatta. He was a learned person. He was a Pandit. He could read the great Sanskrit literature. Okay, he was intelligent. He was knowledgeable. So you will find that the projection of Devadatta, as it has been made by Girish Karnad in Havadana, it is somehow of a good status, of a good outlook, of a good perspectives, you see. But in spite, you will find here that Devadatta is incomplete without the character Kapila, so far as Havadana is concerned. Why? Because everywhere, as it has been pointed out in this particular text, that all the characters or all the persons or inhabitants of Dharmapura, they considered, in the later part obviously, they considered Devadatta and Padmini and Kapila as Ram, Sita and Lakshmana. But before that, you will find that Devadatta and Kapila had been treated by these people as, two bodies but one soul. But now the question certainly arises that though Kapila is not sharing the same status as Devadatta did, Kapila was not a person from the upper strata of society. Kapila was not a person from the Brahmin caste. Kapila was not so much knowledgeable like Devadatta. But why it is possible, or how it is possible, that Kapila and Devadatta was being named in the same strain? So ultimately, you will find that there are multiple kinds of differences. And so far as this particular lecture is concerned, I will discuss in this lecture and also in the next lecture, while I will discuss on Kopila, that how so far that there are ample references of the differences. That means Kopila and Devadatta had been treated as antithetical figures in this particular play. Now, I'm suggesting here that here this particular line has been written that in spite of having multiple differences, so these differences are very important so far as the text is concerned. What kind of differences are there? You have to keep it in mind. So I will discuss it later. So in spite of having multiple differences, he was a friend to Kopila. Yes, it is true. And Karnad considers them like Lava and Kusha. You see, Lava and Kush taken from Ramayana. Rama and Lakshmana taken from Ramayana, and Krishna and Balarama taken from Mahabharata. So everywhere you will find that whenever we will go through the texts of Karnad, everywhere we should identify, we should find that Karnad is to some extent reworking with some mythological references continuously. Yes, it is true. But whenever he deals with the mythological perspectives, we find that Karnad's treatment is more contemporary than mythical, as I've discussed in my previous lecture, while I was discussing about, you see, the existentialism altogether. So that's why the relationship is just like two brothers. One, there is Lava and Kusha, Rama and Lakshmana, Krishna and Balarama. But my focus is, in spite of having such kind of relationship, they are two friends, they are just like two brothers, but at the same time we find that the differences arose towards the end of the play. Why? Because here lies the psychological perspectives. You see that the typical realistic naturalistic trends that we find in the modern drama, specifically in the British drama, okay, you will find a European drama in detail, because it is coming from it is a particular link that comes from the Norwegian dramatist Henrik Ibsen. So therefore, what I'm trying to suggest here, that somehow whenever we deal with Karnad's plays, that is Karnad's drama, we find that somehow Karnad's treatment is always naturalistic. That means whenever the characters have been presented by Karnad, we find that the typical animalistic impulses, that is hunger, sex, and possession, all these things are taking part in representing the character's psyche. That is, the psychological parts have been taken in consideration. Here also, when we will deal with Devadatta, we will find certainly that though Devadatta and Kapila, they are the two bodies and one soul, quote unquote, that have been mentioned in the play, we will find that whenever there is a particular female character comes in between, that is Padmini, as we find in this particular play, we find that somehow the problem certainly arises. But you have to identify that Devadatta was madly in love with Padmini, as it has been mentioned in this particular reference. That with the help, ultimately, we have to identify that somehow it was not possible for Devadatta alone to create such kind of link, create such kind of relationship between himself and Padmini. Without the aid, without the help of Kopila, the son of Lohita, it was not possible for him to marry actually Padmini, right? So what I'm trying to suggest here, that Devadatta knows this very well. Devadatta knows that with the help of Kopila, their union became possible, and he never forgot that. So somehow that's why in Devadatta we can find the kind of gratitude is there, right? But that particular form of gratitude would surely vanish by the new course. Devadatta's love for Padmini. So now we should consider Devadatta from different angles. Okay, so you will find that Devadatta's love for Padmini was very strong. He even considered, she became my guru in poetry of love. So you see, so it is a kind of a passionate representations here. But somehow Devadatta was lacking something, you see. And what was that? Devadatta was lacking the particular physique that is also needed in case of sexual behaviors, or maybe the sexual relationships that had to be taken place between a husband and wife. And somehow we find that, so far as the text is concerned, that Padmini is lacking that, you see. So somehow, whenever Devadatta knows this very well, that he is lacking that particular physic or physical prowess, or maybe the physical, you know, the typical physic that was present, or that was the treasure for Kopila. And somehow from that particular point we can find that a kind of inferiority complex grows within Devadatta. Now, what happens, that after marriage, you see that Devadatta's temperamental change was there, perceptible, concerning Kopila, obviously, after his marriage. And here you can find a mark of jealousy. Here I should read a particular section from the text, that is from Hayavadana. Okay, so here is a particular reference where we can find that. Yes, there is a discussion. It was Act 1 of Hayabadana. I am reading from that particular section. Here is a discussion that is going on. It's a conversation that is going on between Padmini and Devadatta. What Padmini says, actually, Padmini was to some extent, Padmini was waiting for Kopila to come. Padmini says, why is he so late? So, as we have found, as we have already discussed or described, that Padmini had a kind of a secret, desire for the body. I say, mind it, for the body of Kopila, because that particular body is missing from Devadatta. So the particular kind of a craving, the particular kind of a desire was always lurking within the subconscious or maybe unconscious of Padmini. So everywhere, Padmini loves to some extent, the proximity or the presence of Kopila, and that is the fundamental reason why Devadatta feels angry. So Padmini says, why is he means that Kopila, is so late? He would have been here more than an hour ago. And looks out of a window. Devadatta says, have you packed your clothes properly? So they are preparing for a journey. Padmini says, the first thing in the morning. And the mattresses? We may have to sleep out in the open. It's quite chilly. We will need at least 2 rugs. Don't worry. The servant has done all that. And your shawl, also some warm clothes. And Padmini says, what's happened to you today? At other times, you are so full of your books. You even forget to wash your hands after a meal. But today, you have been going on and on and on all morning. Devadatta says, Padmini, I have told you 10 minutes already. 10 times already. I don't like the idea of this trip. You should rest, not face such hazards. The cart will probably shake like an earthquake. It's dangerous in your condition, but you won't listen. So ultimately, here you will find that Devadatta doesn't want for this to the commitment, or for the commitment of these kinds of journey. Why? Because Padmini is pregnant at the time. So it is not good for her health. And at the same time, Devadatta doesn't want that Kopila should accompany them. Right? So let us continue. So here Padmini says, my condition, what's happened to me? To listen to you, one would think I was the first woman in this world to have become pregnant. I only have to stumble, and you act as though it is all finished and gone. Devadatta says, you have no sense of what not to say, so long as you can chatter and run around like a child. And then Padmini considers back at the window, where is Kopila? And Devadatta said, drool over Kopila all day. So that is the line. Padmini says, what do you mean? Devadatta says, what else should I say? The other day, I wanted to read out a play of Vasa's to you. And sure enough, Kopila drops in. And Padmini, oh, that is by biting you still. Is it? But why are you blaming me? He was your friend even before you married me. Wasn't he? He used to drop in every day even then. Devadatta says, but shouldn't he realize I am married now? He just can't go on as before. And Padmini, don't blame him, it's my fault. He learned a bit about poetry from you, and I thought he might enjoy Vasa. So I asked him to come. He didn't want to, but I insisted. I know that. Padmini says, had I realized you would get so upset, I wouldn't have. And Devadatta answers, I am not upset, Padmini. Kopila isn't merely a friend, he is like a brother. One has to collect merit in 7 lives to get a friend like him. But is it wrong for me to want to read to you alone, or to spend a couple of days with you without anyone else around? Of course, once he came, there wasn't the slightest chance of my reading any poetry. You had to hop around him twittering, Kopila, Kopila, every minute. And then Padmini asks, you aren't jealous of him, are you? Devadatta says, me? Jealous of Kopila? Why do you have to twist everything I say? And Padmini says, don't sulk now. I was just trying to be funny. Really, you have no sense of humor. So ultimately, you will find that this light-hearted conversation that was going on between Devadatta and Kopila, somehow it is Devadatta and Padmini, sorry. So it is actually indicating towards the psychological perspectives of these characters, right? So what, say, Padmini says, don't consider that these light-hearted words are merely to be spoken for laughter alone or maybe humor alone. Rather, you have to consider that these are the outcome of some graver intensity that is working within the subconscious of this woman. So somehow, the particular form of, you say, the kind of jealousy that is present within Devadatta, as I mentioned just now, that the jealousy is for 2 sections, you see, or 2 segments. It is not simply the matter that Devadatta was jealous concerning Kopila, Padmini's, desire for Kopila. Rather, he was also jealous because he was suffering from a superiority complex. That means prior to his marriage, he never thought about any importance of body. He always thought about his mind or brain or maybe the head, obviously. But later on, when the marriage is taken place, you will find that Devadatta identifies the importance of the body, right? And then you can find the typical form of inferiority complex is present within Devadatta, and ultimately he feels jealous, right? So from another perspective, we say that Devadatta's oath. Now, the next point is Devadatta's oath. You see, what is the oath? You will find that prior to the marriage, when Devadatta couldn't find any particular way out regarding the marriage between himself and Padmini, then he had taken an oath. What was the oath? He had taken an oath of sacrificing his life and the head to Rudra. Okay, so Kali and Rudra, these have been pointed out. So ultimately in the text you will find that though he was taking the oath of sacrificing his head to Rudra, but ultimately he is doing that to Kali. And the Kali is criticizing for that. He is criticizing Devadatta's activities and so. So what I'm trying to suggest here, you will find that Devadatta had taken an oath of sacrificing his head and life. And at the same time, after the marriage, he had completely forgot that. And when they were in that particular kind of a journey, you will find that Devadatta certainly remembers his oath and the incompletion of it, and somehow he moves to the temple of goddess Kali and sacrifices his body or maybe head at the altar of goddess Kali. That actually being taken. So ultimately, this actually focuses on a particular characteristic of Devadatta, a particular trait of Devadatta's character, and that is Devadatta's commitment, obviously. Though he had forgotten the particular oath that he had taken, but when it comes alive to his mind, then he takes no delay in sacrificing his life at the altar of goddess Kali, and that actually indicates his temperament. That actually indicates his commitment, obviously. That's the fundamental change, so far as the characters are concerned, so far as the characters like Devadatta or Kopila or Padmini are concerned, you will find that the fundamental change within the character has taken place just after the transposition. You know what is transposition? Transposition, by this term, I am trying to refer to the jumbling up of bodies and head, you see. Yes, that means what happens, I'm not going with that. that when there is the Devadatta's head and Kopila's body, and Kopila's head and Devadatta's body, Devadatta's reaction was striking. Why? Because the particular inferiority complex that Devadatta had was regarding the lack of the physical prowess or the body, having the body of just like Kopila. When the transposition is done, you will find that Devadatta is possessing his head and at the same time the body of Kopila. So at that very moment, he was very joyous. Okay. And he was accepted completely by Padmini, because Padmini was in love with Devadatta's head and Kopila's body. That is the fundamental problem. And when Devadatta achieves that, Devadatta was very, very happy with that. You see. And at that very moment, we will find that when Devadatta learns the verdict that head is superior to body at that moment, then he just becomes very happy with that particular kind of judgment. And Devadatta's initial activities show something different. Prior to that particular form, we have found that Devadatta was very much associated with study, with knowledge, with everything, except the different kinds of physical activities. But when Devadatta got Kopila's body, his initial activities are very, very striking. He is taking part in the wrestling match. He is obviously physically very much active in all the activities, right? Like swimming and others. But so or with the gradual transformation, or with the gradual progress or movement of the play, we find that the gradual transformation has been happened in due course. What kind of transformation? At one moment, Devadatta says that we are Brahmins. So it is not possible for us to be engaged in all these physical activities in future continuously. At the initial level, he did that, but later on, he cannot. He says that my purpose of this life, my focus will be the study alone, the knowledge alone, not to be engaged in the physical activities like the son of Lohita. So that's why what happens, that certainly it got changed. At one moment, it was Devadatta's body which becomes powerful, just because he was possessing the particular body of Kopila, but now it had got changed. So from the text, let us bring a particular section. It was described by the dolls, you see. The dolls, they are to some extent conversing with each other. So it is in the Act 2. Here the doll says, the doll 2, it happens, the Padmini says, I think I saw it on a shelf and I'll be there. Devadatta goes to doll 1, moves it aside and picks up the book. Doll 1 shudders. Doll 2 says, why? What happened? Doll 1 says, he touched me. And yes, his palms, they were so rough when he first brought us here, like a laborer's. But now they are soft, sickly soft, like a young girl's. And doll 2 says, I know, I have noticed something too. What? His stomach. It was so tight and muscular. Now I know it's loose. Do you think I will swell up too? They laugh. And doll 1, holding its hands in front of his stomach to suggest a swollen belly, it is swell a little. And doll 2, holding its hands a little further in front, then more, and more, until if it is a woman, there will be a child. And if it is a man, bang. So ultimately here, in this particular reference, in this particular description or a conversation that is going on between doll 2 and doll 1, we can identify the particular kind of a transformation is again taken place. That means it is the head that is actually guiding the body into doing simply nothing. And gradually, Devadatta gets back his own shape. That means the fluffy body you see, the soft body you see. So ultimately, with that particular form, what happens, that as Devadatta gets his own body back, the typical attraction for the body of Kopila in Padmini, it again begins to take shape. Right? It actually indicates towards the end of this particular play that Padmini will certainly return to Kopila, the Lohita's son. And it actually happened toward the end of this particular text. And we find that Padmini goes to Kopila's house, that is at the wood, at the jungle, and Devadatta feels frustrating. He was frustrated, and he comes to the final meeting with Kopila, and he participates in the final duel just to sacrifice himself. And at the end, we will find that it is Devadatta's temperament that he is taking the duel in spite of knowing the particular fact that a particular duel will end in a different way as he had expected. He knows that very well, that he cannot win this particular race, win this particular duel. And to some extent, it's a kind of a suicide that is taking place in the formation of this particular duel. And at the end, he was murdered by Kopila, and Kopila was murdered by Devadatta at the end. It happens. So fundamentally, that is the typical character of Devadatta and his particular role. That means whenever you will try to write the answer on Devadatta's character and his role and responsibilities in this particular play, Hayavadana, you should consider the characters from the perspective of the society, from the perspective of religion, from the perspective of himself, that is from Devadatta's point of view, from Kopila's point of view, from Padmini's point of view, from the perspective of the society in general. So ultimately, the transposition section is very important so far as the particular change within the character of Devadatta is concerned, and ultimately we should deal with that particular form. So that is the ultimate section regarding Devadatta and Devadatta's importance in the Kannad's play. That is, obviously, it is dealing with Hayavadana. So today, up to this, thank you.